Locked in, and I'm Algernon Cash. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for another exciting public affairs conversation. Thank you for tuning in and spending some time with me this afternoon. And I promise you that I've got an exciting conversation lined up for you today. We continue to be in the middle of election 2020. I saw a report today that well over 100 million people have voted across the country, well over 3 million right here in North Carolina. So there's an anticipated 150 million people that will vote in the election this year. And we've obviously already reached about 2/3 of those who will vote in this upcoming election on Tuesday. I continue to be someone who has not voted yet, but don't worry about me. Don't get concerned. I'm going to make it out. I may even go today, go ahead and get it knocked out, so I'm not waiting in any of those long lines come Tuesday. Democrats still continue to outpace Republicans in terms of turnout, but we do see Republicans starting to narrow the gap right now, especially here in my backyard here in North Carolina. Democrats were up 12 points over Republicans in terms of turnout, but Republicans have narrowed that now to about 8 points. So we are seeing an increase in Republican voters making it out to the polls. We also see somewhere around 25% of the people who are coming out to vote are first-time voters, or what we call infrequent voters, meaning they don't normally participate in election cycles. So again, that does point to some significant voter enthusiasm out there right now. And here in North Carolina, we've actually seen the youth vote jump up quite a bit. Normally, the youth vote is somewhere around 9 or 10% of the total vote, but right now it's pacing at about 12%. So it's up about 2 points. And the other phenomenon that we're witnessing is that Black men are attracted to Donald Trump. So to give you a little bit of history on this, Donald Trump carried 8% of all Black voters back in 2016. That was actually an increase, one of the highest on record for a Republican candidate. And 13% of all Black male voters voted for Trump compared to 4% of Black female voters. So Black female voters continue to be one of the most loyal voting blocs within the Democratic Party, only followed by Black men. Some people are arguing that this year, because of all the engagement that Trump has done specifically and to some degree even strategically to the Black community, people are arguing that Trump may increase his support amongst Black voters very significantly in this upcoming election. I've even heard some numbers as high as 20%, that he may go from carrying 8% to 20%. I will tell you that if he carries 20% of all Black voters, he will certainly be reelected to another term. I'm not sure if the number is going to be that high, but I would argue that if President Trump is able to expand his support amongst Black voters even by 2 or 3 points over what he did in 2016, he will win a second term. So if he pulls somewhere around 10, maybe even 12% of all Black voters, that can make a significant difference when you start getting into some of these very tight races in these battleground states like North Carolina, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and others. And so I wanted to have a discussion today with a Black conservative that is supporting Donald Trump. I've been trying for a while to get Eddie Long here on the show to meet you all. Eddie is a pastor. He's a small business owner here in Winston-Salem. And he's also conservative. He's a proud Black Republican, and he's supporting Donald Trump. Eddie, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing wonderful, Mr. Cash. How are you, Algernon?
Man, I'm doing great. I tell you, so many people argue that they have election fatigue, and they're just ready for it to all be over. I guess I'm a little crazy. I enjoy the election season, so I don't want it to quite come to an end. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself after November 3rd. I won't have anything to talk about on Facebook or anything. I'll have to find something new to focus all my energy on. Have you already voted yet?
Not yet. I'm in the same boat you're in. I'm a last minute voter. I'll probably show up on November 3rd and make my vote.
Well, make sure you get out and vote, man. I will be severely disappointed if you don't vote.
I would definitely vote.
And I know you're supporting Trump, so I think Trump needs all the votes that he can get here in North Carolina. It seems like it's going to be a very, very tight race. Do you want to make any early predictions? Do you think President Trump will get reelected to a second term?
I do. I'm one of the few, maybe the few people that actually believe that, but there's a few minorities of blacks that believe that. But yes, I do believe he'll be reelected. I think Republicans are the silent majority. We don't do a lot of talking about who we're voting for, and we kind of keep it close to our chest. And remember now, just 4 years ago, we were taunting that Hillary was going to be the next president. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone that says she wasn't. She was well ahead in all the so-called polls, but at the end of the day, she did not win. So I think this is going to be like a similar transaction. That's what I believe.
Well, I think in 2016, so many people, including the Clinton campaign, forgot that we don't elect our president through a popular vote. We do so
right.
through an electoral college.
Exactly.
And some people like to argue that the polls in 2016 were wrong. The polls were actually right. Hillary Clinton won the national and popular vote by a significant margin. So the polls were right in that regard. She just wasn't able to pick up the required electoral votes to be able to be successful. And I think that speaks to the strategic mind of someone like President Trump. Clearly, when he ran his race back in 2015-16, he understood that all he really needed was to pick up some very strategic support in a lot of these battleground states, and he could be victorious. And it feels like to me, Eddie, that's happening all over again. Trump has been very deliberate about his outreach and engagement to Black voters. And I think that has a lot to do with this particular strategy that I just outlined. You've been around the Republican Party for quite some time. One of my arguments has always been Republicans have not been very upfront. They've not even attempted a lot of times to engage Black voters. What do you think is so different about this president and his strategy to actually meet Black voters where they are?
I think the difference between Donald Trump and other politicians, you see, first of all, he's not a politician. And that's what most people must understand, especially us Black people must understand. He's not a politician. He's a businessman. And Algernon, you know as well as I know, businessmen think differently from politicians. Politicians care more about what other people think than getting something done. A businessman don't really care much about what you think. They're goal-oriented, goal-driven. They have an idea that they're going to get done, whether the masses like it or not, if they feel that's the right thing to do. That's just business. And Donald Trump is a businessman. And so many of us in the African American community that kind of frustrates me a little bit, we get caught up in the rhetoric of what he says and how he says it. We have to get out of our feelings somewhat. We got to be more emotional mature, okay? I don't know about you, but I've been around a lot of wealthy people. And when you're around a lot of wealthy people in a room with them, their conversations are very different from the one they will have kind of in public. I mean, they're very, a lot of them are very egotistical. A lot of them are believe in their point of view and only their point of view. And they're serious about something, they believe in something, they do whatever it takes to get that particular thing done. A politician, by the way, may not do that. They would do it, but they do it in a more, I guess, subtle way and not in your face type of conversation. So I think in the Black community, something that we may get misconstrued when talking about Donald Trump is how he delivers the message. And as Black men, I think what we're figuring out is not that we care so much about that message. We really care more about the product. What's going to be the end product of what you're saying, like the platinum plan and the things that he's looking to do. He may not do it well as far as articulating his points of view when it comes to us, but he's saying what he's going to do. And the other side, I haven't heard one thing that they're saying that they're going to do for the Black community. Now, let's be clear on something. I'm not talking about people of color. I'm not talking about minorities. I'm not talking about women. I'm not talking about the gay population. What I'm talking about, what are you specifically going to do for the Black community? Something Ice Cube alluded to earlier that we talked about. That what is your plan for us? And don't water it down with adding other folks into the conversation. And I think that we as Black people need, especially Black men, need to understand that we have a different responsibility, I think, sometimes than the Black woman. Maybe that's why she's more loyal to the Democrats. We have a responsibility to take care of our families and want to be that in that position to do so. So when someone's talking about economics, someone's talking about setting up ways where I can start a business, when someone's talking about creating capital that I can tap into, when someone's talking about those types of things, and I think that gets our attention because that was really, really it's a core of us as Black men.
Yeah, I think you're on to something, and I agree with you. I think the Ice Cube's plan or his contract with Black America really centered around the idea that, you know, specifically Black Americans need to be addressed and not particularly lumped in with all these other categories. And I do feel like you're on to something in regards to some of the economic issues, because I think the economic issues and trying to close the income gap and the wealth gap and some of the home ownership rates and that kind of thing are the things that really attract a lot of Black men. I think that, you know, there's this misnomer that Black men want a handout. I think they just want a hand up, and from there we can sort of do it on our own. You know, I've got a listener that joined us that said that Donald Trump is a horrible person, and it's beyond political party for me. He's just an awful person. And this happens to be a African-American woman who's listening to us this afternoon. And, you know, Eddie, 83% of Black voters actually believe that Trump is a racist. 85% of Black voters disapprove of the president's job performance since he's taken office. What would you say to someone like that? I mean, is Donald Trump a horrible person?
I don't know Donald Trump personally. I don't know Joe Biden personally. I don't know Kamala Harris personally. I don't know any of these people personally. So I don't know if they're a good person or a bad person. What we tend to look at is what they project to us. So to say someone is racist, for instance, we throw that card out like racist, like he's the first president that's been racist, or he's the only president that has been racist. How do you know others haven't been racist? Because they just haven't said it. And what makes you say he's racist? I don't see him as being a racist. However, what I do see him as being is a billionaire white man that's used to having his way. That's what I see. I see him being in a privileged position that he is exercising. So if that makes him racist, he's in a huge class of people that enjoy the privilege that he has. Now, throwing that racism card out so easily, so coy, is not genuine. It's without facts to back up your claim. It's an easy thing to say. It says someone is racist, so it's easy to dismiss someone by doing that.
You know, I think Donald Trump is misunderstood. You know, he's a 70-year-old white man who came up in a very different time than many of these young folks today. And I think sometimes the rhetoric that you get has a lot to do with the environment that he matured in, and that environment was certainly way different than what we experience today. You know, in fact, my grandfather, who passed away in 2009, he might have made some comments to you a few times that would have made you think he was a racist, but he certainly was not. He just came up in a very different time. And so I do think Donald Trump, as well as Joe Biden, who has made a long list of racist remarks, I think a lot of these people just are somewhat of a function of the time period by which they came up. You know, Trump claims that he has done more for the Black community than any president in history except for Abraham Lincoln. And, you know, routinely he does talk about some of the things that he's done with the economy, criminal justice reform, and some of his educational priorities. What do you think about some of Trump's accomplishments? Has he been good for Black America?
I think he has, and a couple of reasons why I say that. And again, set aside the rhetoric, set aside the things that are being said. Just look at the things that he has accomplished. The HBCUs have been, for the first time, have got a long-term funding deal, which they never had before. Secondly, the unemployment rate prior to COVID was the lowest it had ever been. Now, his policies about illegal immigrants coming to the country will benefit the Black community. Do you remember years ago, I don't know about you, but my family, we come from a family of brick masons and carpenters and people like that. And nowadays, because of the illegal immigration, some of the things, those jobs, those opportunities, those small business opportunities is no longer there for them. So what he's saying is, look, we need to put a halt to this, to slow it down. That in itself will benefit our community the most. But for some reason, we seem to want to lump everyone into our plight, our situation. And then we look at, and again, they wore it down to people of color and minorities and things of that nature. And we get all caught up in the language that's being used, except looking for what is it to benefit our community the most. And what I've seen he's done with the unemployment rate, about the jobs, bringing the jobs back into this country, manufacturing jobs, that at one time, that was our bread and butter. Our middle class was just that. The folks that's working in factories, the folks that was building things, those high-paying jobs were the ones that was elevating our people to the middle class and upper middle class. It wasn't academia that did that. It was manufacturing that did that. So we've gotten away from that. And because we've gotten away from it, it caused our wealth or our income to stagnate or go down. And now we find ourselves in a situation where so many of us are below that poverty line now. It had increased, and we want to blame other things. But what he's doing is trying to reverse the policies of old to try to bring back that booming economy that we once had.
You know, if you're just now joining us, you are so late to the party. You should be ashamed of yourself. But you're locked in. I'm Algernon Cash, and the other voice that you're listening to with me this afternoon is Eddie Long. Eddie Long is a small business owner and pastor here in Winston-Salem, and he's also a Black Republican supporting Donald Trump. And we're just having a conversation about the ongoing presidential election. And, you know, I tell you, Eddie, I just wrote an op-ed piece for the Winston-Salem Chronicle. I think it's actually coming out today. And it talks about some of the achievements that Donald Trump has led within Black America. And, you know, I think you're on to something here about illegal immigration. I've been asked several times here recently, what do I think the greatest threat facing Black America is it police brutality or police violence? And I say to that, hell no. We've got so many much larger threats that are facing Black America right now, whether it be health disparities like cancer, diabetes, HIV/AIDS, the gaps within education, illegal immigration, which you just mentioned, I think is a big threat to Black America simply because it depresses wages, makes it much harder for Black America to close that income gap with their white counterparts. And I also think homicide, quite frankly, homicide is the number 6 cause of death for all Black Americans throughout the country. We've got somewhere around 16,000 Black Americans dying from homicide every year. We've got somewhere around maybe less than 1,300 that die because of an altercation with the police. So I do think we've got some really big threats that are facing Black America. You know, Eddie, when you look at some certain metrics, when you look at the wealth gap, when you look at the income gap, when you look at home ownership rates, all these numbers are basically well below their 50-year average. I mean, so if you look at the income gap, the income gap is no more closed today than it was in 1968. Home ownership rates for Black America are actually lower than what it was in 1968. Prior to the 1960s Great Society, led by LBJ, you had somewhere around 70% of every African-American household had a mother and a father in the house. Now you've got 70% of Black households that are basically single parent households. What do you think some of these social programs like welfare, subsidized housing, and even some of these misguided criminal justice policies, what have they done to Black America?
Algernon, the number one threat to the Black people today, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is the erosion of the Black family, the nuclear family, the mother, the father, and the children. You know, what the social programs have done, two of the biggest expenses most of us have as a family is housing and food. And what the government did back in the 70s, as we know, they came back and told that Black woman, listen, we will provide you housing and we will provide you food. But what you cannot have is a husband. Now, if you have him, then you own your own. But if you can have the children, as long as you don't become married, because if you become married and become a family unit, we cannot help you. And that happens in the early 70s. And that was the beginning of the end of our families as we know them. So when we have made this thing, single motherhood, some sort of badge of honor in our community, and we're the only ones that actually that does that. I mean, you don't see the Asian community do that. You don't see the Hispanic community that does that. You don't see the white community that does that. We seem to be the only community that says, okay, it's okay for that. But in reality it's against God's principles, for one. But if we want to be a part of this American plan and tap into the economic system of America, one of those plans is the family unit, a 2-parent household to be able to raise a family. Now, I know it's not popular. I know it's not something that we really want to talk about. And as long that's one of our problems, sir. We refuse to address the issues, the cancer that's in our bodies as a people. We refuse to address them. So we continue having children out of wedlock, continue doing that, and the society said, well, that's okay. It's not okay. At some point, we need to get together and say, look, what is it that we want? How can we fix us? Because no one's going to fix us but us. It's not coming from the outside. We have to, I believe, and I'm sure you do, and many conservatives believe, in having responsibility for one's actions, good or bad. Take responsibility for it. And we must take responsibility for our actions. We talk about Black Lives Matter. We talk about all these hashtags that we have now. But do we truly believe that? Because if we truly believe that, we would take our lives more seriously. Take the lives of our children more seriously. But we tend to have these hashtags and these so-called slogans that sounds good. They really do. They sound good. But is it going to solve our problem? Of course, Black Lives Matter. All lives matter, but Black lives does matter, but it must matter to us. First, we must stop killing each other. First, we must respect each other. First, before we expect others to do it. We should never expect someone to do for us that we're not willing to do for ourselves. In a nutshell, that's what conservatism is about, being able to do for yourself and look inside yourself to get the best out of yourself. And yes, can the government assist you? Of course, but that's not their job. The job is for us as the people to look inside of ourselves and try to be our best self. And yes, if there's programs or there are things out there to assist us to do that, then so be it. But that's not a way of life. And we must, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. No, I was just going to say again, if you're just now joining us, you're locked in. I'm Algernon Cash. We're having a public affairs discussion this afternoon. Thank you for being here with us. The other person that you hear joining me that's locked in with me is Eddie Long. Eddie Long's a small business owner and a pastor here in Winston-Salem. And he's also a Black Republican, and he's voting for Donald Trump. Trump has been getting a lot of attention in the news here lately amongst Black voters. We've seen some very well-known musicians like Ice Cube and 50 Cent and Lil Wayne and several others that have came out in support of Donald Trump. I know that some people have tried to attempt to make him the face of the Black Republicans that are voting for Donald Trump. But, you know, there's people like Clarence Henderson, who spoke at the Republican National Convention, that was this 1960s civil rights leader, also a co-founder of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and he is supporting Donald Trump. So I think there's far more African Americans out here that are supporting the president than most people know. I'm checking some of your questions and comments now. I do see one particular comment from Eunice that says the unemployment rate regarding Black America was due to Obama. I'm sorry, Eunice, you're wrong. And I've got to make sure I clarify that. Again, I do have an op-ed coming out in the Winston-Salem Chronicle. I think it's going to come out today or maybe no later than Monday. But I do talk about some of the economic achievements that Donald Trump was able to accomplish within Black America. When Trump came into office, Eunice, the black unemployment was at 7.8%. And Donald Trump got it to a 50-year low, down to 5.4%. So yes, I would say that Trump did inherit a growing economy. I will say that, but I also think his tax plan and his willingness to reduce burdensome regulations on corporate America had a lot to do with basically creating the longest economic expansion that we've seen in history. And that's not particularly my opinion, but that just happens to be fact. You know, Eddie, as I get ready to wrap up, I'm running out of time. I've probably got a couple of minutes left. I want to spend some time talking about the Platinum Plan. That's right. The plan that President Trump just released. And it lists several accomplishments that he would like to work on if he's afforded a second term. He wants to create 3 million jobs within Black America and wants to mobilize somewhere around $500 billion in capital. He also wants to do some things like put the KKK on the national terror list as well. You know, Eddie, Trump is taking a lot of heat from Black America, despite the fact that he's come up with this plan. They're saying that he can't accomplish it. It's just a pipe dream. Why didn't he do it when he first got into office? What do you say to some of those people? Is this plan a little too late?
No. It actually is right on time. And his plan is bold. If anyone takes the time to read it, he has put in writing what he is looking to do for Black America. He put it in writing, saying, this is my plan for you. Now, not just rhetoric, not just talking about it, but putting it in tangible terms where you can see it. Now, this is not a small thing. You're talking about creating, the jobs for the Black community. You're talking about, and you and I both know this is very important, being able to create capital, access to capital. Adjon, none of this stuff matters if you don't have access to capital. Let's be honest. As a businessman, It matters not if I don't have access to capital. Many folks that talk about this thing has never met a payroll. I find people all the time talking about business, but they don't understand they've never had to meet a payroll. They never had to pay healthcare insurance for employees. You never had to pay unemployment tax. You never had to pay payroll tax. A lot of the politicians, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, never had to meet a payroll in their life. They've always lived off the government. So of course they got great government plans because they lived off the government. Trump has never lived off the government. He took advantage of the laws that's on the book that any smart businessman would do. That's certainly what I would do if the laws were there and I took the time to read the laws. Of course, I hire smart people around me to find loopholes. Of course, that's called business. Now, those of you that gets mad at that, then you don't understand business. And that's what I think that's where the hatred and all that comes from, is lack of understanding. The man that they see on that TV screen, not a man they're used to seeing. They're used to seeing someone that's going to smile at you, going to speak softly, going to tell you things that will twinkle your ear, give you hope. That's what we're used to hearing from a politician. I dare you say you're not going to do this. Politicians don't normally come out and say no. They say we'll see, or they'll put a spin on it. So you get someone that's brash, that maybe not be politically correct on how he says things. And I don't agree. Let me be clear on this. I don't agree with everything he says and how he says it. I don't agree. But guess what? I didn't agree with my grandfather either. I didn't agree with my father, everything he says. I certainly agree with my mother for everything she says. But guess what? They came from a different place. They come from a place that I was not there. So my grandfather was speaking from a place of wisdom. So now that I'm older, I understand everything my grandfather said when I was in my 20s not to do. Now, if I had listened, I may have been in a better position today than I am, but I did not. So some of the things that he's saying now, we just may not be mature enough, emotionally mature enough to handle.
Yeah, I'm someone who I've certainly voiced my concern and even frustration with the rhetoric out of the White House, and there are many times that I wish this president would behave more presidential, and I think that's also the reason why the current administration has alienated some establishment Republicans like Colin Powell and Michael Steele and so many others that feel like they just can't get on board with the rhetoric that's coming out of the White House. But I also agree with you, Eddie. You have to be able to discern between what the man says and what he's actually doing, and that makes a big difference. I do want to address a couple more questions and comments, and then I got to get out of here. Eunice came back and said, with the Platinum Plan, he could have did that 3 years ago. Actually, Eunice, there's several things that Trump has accomplished in the 4 years that he's been in office. And some of that is really specific to Black America, like opportunity zones, permanent HBCU funding, as well as a variety of other initiatives for the HBCU community, as well as the First Step Act. But again, I've got an op-ed. Please look for that. I've got an op-ed coming out in the Winston-Salem Chronicle where I will address some of the achievements that Donald Trump has been able to accomplish for Black America. And then also Denise J says, well, who will hold him accountable? And, Denise, I would say to you that voters have to hold him accountable. That's how it's always worked here in our country, and that's how it'll continue to work. If voters are displeased with the performance of the president, or he doesn't follow through on what he's promised, then I'm certain they'll make the party pay for that. Whether it's in 2 years during the midterm election, or in another 4 years when we have another opportunity to elect the president. Again, thank y'all for joining me today. You've been locked in. We have this public affairs conversation every day, Monday through Friday at 3:00. On Monday, I do have Jeff Phillips, who's the chairman of the Guilford County Board of Commissioners, also a staunch Republican. He'll be joining me here early next week. Of course, Election Day is on Tuesday. Don't be like Eddie and I. Go ahead and get out and vote. Stop procrastinating. Get off your couch. Turn off the Facebook. turn it all off and go down and go stand in the lines and make sure you register your vote. All seriousness though, make sure you do get out and vote. Early voting, the last day is today. And then obviously if you didn't vote early and you're not registered to vote, you will not be able to vote. So you still, if you're not registered to vote, you still have today that you can go register and vote within the same day. I always want to encourage you all to go follow us on YouTube. We've got the YouTube channel up and running. This particular conversation that you just listened to today will be available on YouTube. If not tonight, at some point over the weekend. If you like what you heard today, click like. Make sure you share it with someone. If you didn't like what you hear today, click like anyway and still share it with someone and let them know what we talked about. You guys make sure y'all have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Y'all stay locked in. All right, Eddie, we're good, man.